You just stay at home all day, right? Tired from just cleaning? Why don't you try switching places with me and see the real struggle? Maybe I should divorce such a useless wife. Not this again. The way my husband treats me, a homemaker, is truly exhausting. My name is Jennifer. I'm a 34-year-old woman. I married David, my coworker, 2 years ago after a workplace romance. Back then, I planned to continue working after marriage. But David said, "I'll work hard outside. You take care of the home." That's my ideal. Men work outside, women protect the home. I naively agreed. I quit my job to become a full-time homemaker, influenced by David's perspective. I used to be easily swayed by others' opinions. Above all, I deeply loved David. So, I followed whatever he said without questioning. I guess I was blinded by love. If only I had stood my ground and not quit my job. Maybe things wouldn't have turned out this way. That's what I still believe. People think homemakers just laze around at home all day. But in reality, it's not like that. Cleaning, laundry, neighborhood meetings, they all consume more time than one might think. Doing all these tasks daily, by myself, is honestly tough. Employees get weekends off, but homemakers don't. So, on Sundays, when David's home, I'd ask, "Hey, I'm a bit busy. Could you help clean the bathroom?" But he'd instantly get grumpy. "Seriously? I work every day to provide, and now you want me to work at home too? Who do you think provides the meals?" If I dared to say, "I appreciate your hard work during the week. But we're a team, right? Can't you help out a bit on your days off?" David would snap back, "Stop bossing me around. You think you can survive on your own, just being a homemaker? Want a divorce?" David immediately snapped. "Who do you think you are? Just because you're home all day doesn't mean you can boss me around. Want me to divorce you? Think you, just a housewife, can survive on your own?" Shockingly, he threatened divorce. I was at a loss for words. Maybe I shouldn't have reacted the way I did. From then on, every time I said something, David would end with, "If you don't like it, let's divorce." It felt like he was using that phrase to control me. Even though I used to work, I had retired and become a housewife. The idea of divorce that David kept bringing up was terrifying. If he really divorced me, how would I survive? What about income? Where would I live? For me, a housewife, nothing was scarier than the thought of divorce. What scared me the most was David himself. He used to be so kind. How did he change so much after we got married? Did I make a mistake in judging him? I deeply regretted marrying David. Lately, as soon as David comes home, he'd say, "Isn't it obvious you should greet me at the door when I, the breadwinner, come home? Who do you think pays for everything here?" Yes, David earns the money, but I take care of everything at home. We're supposed to be partners, not in a master-servant relationship. It's supposed to be an equal relationship. Yet, David seems to believe he's superior. He looks down on me, thinking he's above. At first, I thought maybe he was venting work frustrations on me, so I kept quiet. But over time, David began to act like he was always right, and every day was like this. After his lecture, David carelessly throws his suit all over the place and changes into his casual clothes. I pick them up and toss them into the washing machine. This is a daily routine. Even after eating the dinner I prepared, he complains, "Is this all you can cook? I work hard for you, and this is the meal I come home to? Where's your gratitude?" I've grown tired of dealing with David's constant complaints. Despite David not earning a high salary, I manage our finances, saving for our future children, leaving little room for extra expenses. Still, I always try to prepare healthy meals, using nutritious ingredients and cutting down on salt. Yet, he still finds reasons to complain. I felt like everything I did was being negated, and my self-confidence dwindled day by day. On top of that, he demands $500 a month for his personal expenses. If I gave him that much, our finances would be in the red. At first, I used some of my savings to cover the expenses, but that wasn't sustainable. So, I tapped into my connections and started a remote job that I could do from home. Of course, I didn't tell David. You see, a while back, I had mentioned, "Hey, things are a bit tight with our finances. I was thinking of getting a part-time job. Is that okay?" To which he snapped, "What? Are you saying I don't earn enough? You probably just want extra cash to splurge, right? You should just stick to taking care of the house." Knowing David, I was sure that if I earned, he'd just take more for his personal expenses. So, I decided to work remotely without telling David. The money I earned went towards our living expenses and savings for the future. A former colleague introduced me to this remote job. I would log into the company system and handle administrative tasks, mainly settling travel expenses claimed by employees. Having experience from my previous job, the work wasn't challenging. More than that, being home all day, this remote job gave me a sense of purpose. It felt rewarding. Then, one day, after juggling remote work and household chores, I was exhausted. I decided to take a short break and lay down on the sofa. That was a mistake. I unintentionally fell asleep and was awakened by David in the evening. It was already night. Of course, dinner wasn't ready, and neither was the bathroom. David, seeing this, sighed and said, "What were you doing all day? Lounging around, neglecting the house? I come home, and you're just napping on the sofa. Seriously, homemakers are just leeches." Usually, I wouldn't react to David's words, but that day, I was tired. So, I snapped back. "What's your problem? I just happened to fall asleep today. Stop making it sound like I do nothing all day." David, not expecting a retort, turned red with anger. "You're defying me? I'm the head of this household. How dare you speak to me in that tone? If you're going to be defiant, leave this house." "Well, maybe I will. I've been wanting to take some time for myself anyway." It was a classic case of tit for tat. I quickly packed some essentials and headed to a nearby hotel. The look of shock on David's face as I left was priceless. He probably never imagined I'd actually leave. In the past, I would have just been bewildered if David told me to leave. But now, things were different. After all, I had my remote job as a source of income. Being confined to the house and only doing household chores, this job became my only connection to the outside world. The feeling of being appreciated and thanked directly for my work. Seeing my efforts being rewarded with a paycheck. Having never received gratitude from David for all the housework, this job had become a significant part of my life. Thanks to my remote job, I gained confidence and strength. Maybe some time apart would be good for both of us. With that thought, I lived in the hotel for about a week. During that time, I continued my remote work from the hotel and even uncovered some fraudulent activities by an employee. Then, one day, my phone rang. It was David. I was thinking it might be time for me to return home, so I hoped this call would be the perfect opportunity. When I answered, David said, "Hey, isn't it about time you came back? You've had some time to reflect, right?" Who does he think needs to reflect here? Even as I was at a loss for words, David continued, "You must be missing me, right? Life must be tough without me. If you apologize, I'll let you come back home." Such arrogance from him. Who does he think he is? So, I decided to play it humble and said, "I'm really sorry. It was my fault. I miss you every day. Please, let me come back home." To my surprise, he responded with such relief. "I knew it. You can't handle life without me. Fine, come back home." He couldn't even see through my act. I was taken aback but decided to return home with an innocent face. When I got back, the house was a complete mess. Clothes were scattered all over the floor, with no place to step. Trash overflowed from the bin, giving off a foul smell. Dirty dishes piled up in the sink. In just a week, he managed to turn the place upside down. I was almost impressed. I thought maybe he'd have cooled off in my absence. Maybe he'd have taken care of the house. All my maybes were shattered. He probably called me back because he couldn't handle the mess anymore. Not because he missed me or felt sorry. Realizing this, I was disappointed in David. I couldn't believe it had come to this. I was once again disappointed by David's carelessness. But in a way, I was grateful. Because it gave me the push I needed to do what I had planned for David without any hesitation. For about a month, I acted as if nothing was wrong at home. I cleaned up the mess David made and followed his every command, even when he complained. Then the day of reckoning came. I executed the plan I had prepared and waited for David to come home. I didn't prepare dinner or even the bathroom. When David came home, he was angry that I hadn't greeted him at the door or prepared dinner. I simply apologized. "I'm sorry. I was so busy today and couldn't get to it." Feeling empowered by my submissive attitude, David lashed out even more than usual. And then he said those words. "You're just a parasite, you know? You can't earn money and can't even manage the house properly. I wonder what would happen to a woman like you if we divorced. Maybe I should just file for divorce, huh?" I had been waiting for him to say that. The word divorce that David flaunted like a badge of honor. With a smile, I replied, "You don't need to file. I've already prepared the divorce papers." David looked confused. So, I showed him the actual divorce papers. Already signed by me. "All you need to do is sign." David started to panic. Of course. He never expected me to agree to a divorce. "What? No, you'd be the one in trouble if we divorced, right? Don't worry. I'll be just fine. Haven't you noticed? Look around the house. Don't you see?" David looked around frantically. "Where's the TV? The fridge is gone too. What's going on? Oh, did you forget? I brought the TV and fridge when we moved in. So, it's only natural that I take them with me when we divorce. I had everything I bought removed by professionals." "Wait, you can't divorce me. How will you survive without my income?" "See," I sighed. "Don't you get it? The person handling expense claims at your company? That's me. We never met face to face, only communicated through chat or email, so you never realized." Yes, I was working remotely for my former workplace, which is David's company. The old acquaintance I mentioned was a colleague from that company. I had been hired part-time on the condition of remote work. I used my maiden name as my family name and kept my first name. At first, I thought David might find out, but that was needless worry. For me, David had long forgotten my maiden name. "I'll tell you one last thing. Your expense claims were clearly off compared to others. So, I looked into it. I've already reported the results to our boss." The employee misconduct I discovered while at the hotel was none other than David. While handling David's expense reports, I found several suspicious claims. Claims for travel expenses for supposed business trips and hotel stays. But as his wife, I knew David was home on those days. David was trying to embezzle money by claiming fake business trips. He probably thought he'd gotten away with it. But as his wife, it was clear to me he hadn't actually gone on those trips. So, I cross-referenced his past claims with his actions on those days and investigated all his fraudulent claims. At first, I wondered if I could somehow brush it under the rug. But after a week in the hotel and hearing David's words over the phone, and seeing the state of our home, I made up my mind. I'd be the one to end things with this man. I've already reported it to our boss, and I've asked for appropriate action to be taken. Tomorrow, when David goes to work, he'll be called into the boss's office and questioned severely. He was misusing company money, after all. It's only right. Thank you for everything. I'll be happy on my own. Goodbye. My belongings have already been shipped to my new place. All that's left is for me to leave this house. Leaving a stunned David behind, I walked out of the house with a spring in my step. Later on, David was dismissed from the company. Being dismissed makes it hard to find another job, and it seems David is still unemployed and attending a job support center. Of course, the house is reportedly a mess. David was reluctant to sign the divorce papers and kept asking me to come back, but I had no intention of doing so. I left all the procedures to my lawyer and finalized the divorce. As for me, I switched from remote work to full-time and fully returned to work. I'll be single for a while, but I plan to look for a new relationship soon. Of course, my criteria for a partner is someone who's willing to share both household chores and child-rearing. Plagued by the constant snide comments from my MIL, Brittany, and Fael, Christopher, since the beginning of my marriage and harassed for not being able to have children, I was at my wit's end. Even my supposed support, my husband, David, would say, "Kayla, my Isael, is young and beautiful, and unlike Misty, she gave birth to children right away. I really envy my brother, William." And that's how things ended up. To make matters worse, Brittany accused me of infidelity as the reason for our childlessness, claiming, "Misty is cheating, so I caught evidence with a hidden camera." Such an outrageous statement was made. That's when I devised a plan. I gathered all the relatives under the guise of my nephew, Mike's birthday party, and decided to play the so-called evidence of infidelity that Brittany mentioned. Upon seeing that, Kayla, David, and Christopher each uttered, "Just as I thought," with faces filled with despair. My name is Misty, 34 years old. I work in the international division of a medium-sized trading company. I live with David, who is the same age as me and works for a steel manufacturer, along with Brittany and Christopher. We don't have any children yet. I met David at a street mixer I was invited to by a friend. I was in my 4th year at the job, finally getting the hang of things and starting to find the work interesting, though I wasn't much interested in marriage. However, a college friend insisted, and I couldn't refuse. Thus, my interest was primarily in the special menus prepared by each store for the street mixer. I felt a bit detached from my more socially active friends, but that's where I met David, who had come along with one of those friends. David, as it turned out, wasn't too keen on the event either and had been dragged along reluctantly. So, as outsiders, we ended up sticking together, but I intended our association to be just for that occasion and deliberately did not exchange contact information. However, exactly 1 week after the street mixer, on a Friday, I received a call on my mobile phone from an unknown number. I ignored it at first, but after work hours, the calls came every 10 minutes. What on earth is this all about? Irritated, I was about to block the number, but before I did, I decided to at least find out who was calling me so incessantly, and answered the phone. The call was from David, whom I had met at the street mixer. "Ah, good. You're Misty, right?" It was a relief to find out who was behind the unknown nuisance calls, but I hadn't given David my number at that time. Suspicious. "I got this number by begging a friend who was there with us," he explained. It seemed my friend, who had hit it off with his male companion, decided to start dating after meeting at the street mixer. Meanwhile, David, who had failed to ask for my contact details, learned about this from his companion and managed to get my number by pestering his friend. Despite being dismayed by my friend who casually shared my number and David for taking advantage of that, I somehow started dating David, and a year later, he proposed, and we decided to get married. It wasn't a passionate love affair, but I thought I could live peacefully with him, who had a somehow gentle and endearing personality. There were no issues on my end regarding the marriage. My parents had been living separately since I entered university. They never divorced, apparently because there was no particular benefit to doing so at this point. Friends and acquaintances would ask if I wasn't lonely, but considering my parents were essentially living separately under the same roof, I saw their situation as an inevitable outcome. Still, they paid for my university tuition, so during long breaks, I would visit both my father's and mother's homes. But after starting my job, I mostly just reported my well-being through social media, using work as an excuse. When I told my parents I was getting married, they said they would attend the wedding if we had one, but when I told them, "We're just going to register the marriage and not do anything special," they later sent me a generous gift of money, which was more than enough for me. However, Brittany and Christopher seemed dissatisfied with my parents. Settling their only daughter's marriage with money seems quite unreasonable. Indeed. It's worrisome to think about the future. That's what they painfully said to me. But David defended me, saying, "Money is a perfectly valid expression of love. It's strange for Mom, who has never worked, to say that. If Dad knows how hard it is to earn money, he shouldn't say things like that either." That made me truly glad I had chosen him. However, about 4 years into our marriage, things began to take a turn for the worse. The initial cause was my promotion. I had been working hard in my assigned department since joining the company, and when I took the promotion exam that year, "Misty, you said during your job interview that you wanted to work globally in the future, right? How about gaining some experience in the international division first?" That's what I was told. I was thrilled that my hard work was recognized and assumed that I could share this joy with David. However, upon hearing my news, David visibly soured. I see. And what do you want to say with that? I got promoted. I'm so great." And he barked. Shocked by his unexpected reaction, I wondered if I had said something to upset him and apologized. "Sorry, that wasn't my intention." But David retorted, "Acting all meek like that is proof you're mocking me, isn't it?" He roughly threw his half-finished can of beer into the trash and stormed out of the condo, slamming the door behind him. He didn't return for a week. He wouldn't read messages on his mobile phone, nor would he answer calls. I even tried calling his office, but he was out, and all I could learn was that he was at least safe. I thought about waiting for him outside his office, but that would have been too embarrassing for him. So, I went to my in-laws, Brittany and Christopher, to seek advice. I expected to be scolded, but it was my only option. Despite the sudden visit, I was surprised at how smoothly I was received, but as soon as I stepped into the living room, David, who had been waiting, lashed out. "What do you want now? Came to mock me some more?" I froze, bombarded by his harsh words. Of course, I immediately said that wasn't my intention and apologized for any misunderstanding, but he wouldn't listen. To make matters worse, Brittany and Christopher joined in, berating me. "Thinking you can act all high and mighty just because you work too? Don't you know that's not how a wife should behave? This is why we were against marrying someone from an uncultured family." They shouted just as loudly as David. From there, it was a never-ending lecture on how I was at fault for hurting David's pride. Eventually, "David has no intention of returning to the condo you two lived in. If you don't want a divorce, leave that condo and come live here with us. We'll retrain you in how to be a proper wife to our son," was their demand. In hindsight, I wonder why I didn't just say, "Then divorce is fine," at that moment. But at that time, I still had feelings for David, and having grown up watching my parents live as a married couple in name only, I probably didn't understand what a marriage was supposed to be, reflecting misguidedly. Soon after, I did as Brittany suggested and left the condo to live with my in-laws. They were very pleased, but the reason soon became clear. William, David's brother who is 3 years younger than him, had been living with the in-laws, but about 3 months before my promotion, he had said, "I've found a girlfriend and will be moving out to live on my own," and left the family home. Until then, Brittany, who had adored William for graduating from a university ranked higher than David's, was shocked by the unforeseen event of William moving out. But the problem wasn't just the shock. The financial contributions William had been making to the household were a significant issue. They were prideful and loved to show off, often gathering relatives to flaunt expensive wines and meals. Obviously, Christopher's earnings from re-employment after retirement couldn't cover everything, and the money William contributed was their last hope. That's the real reason they convinced David, who came home complaining about me, to move in together. David, feeling inferior to his more successful brother, suddenly enjoyed being fussed over. When I realized this, it made sense, but bad things kept happening. Soon after, William married his girlfriend, but my new sale, Kayla, turned out to be the worst. Kayla was 6 years younger than William and 2 years younger than David and me. She appeared fragile and delicate, exactly the type that triggers men's instinct to protect. That was true for Christopher and David too. They became noticeably unsettled every time Kayla visited, acting like her entourage. Naturally, Brittany wasn't pleased and took it out on me.
The reason David is smitten with Kayla is because you lack appeal. If you just showed us a grandchild, even Christopher would regain his composure as a grandfather,
she said. She even demanded that I quit my job and focus on preconception care. However, due to Brittany and Christopher's wasteful spending, the household expenses only increased, and David's salary couldn't cover everything. Even when I showed them the household budget and explained this,
it's all because you're bad at managing money. Always making excuses.
They wouldn't listen, just repeating their criticisms of me. Around that time, Kayla got pregnant. Even Brittany, who had disliked Kayla, caught grandchild fever once she learned the child would be William's. She doted on the newborn grandson, Mike, immensely. That led to Brittany eagerly welcoming Kayla's visits, which she had previously avoided, even saying,
"Oh, how wonderful it would be to live under the same roof as such a cute grandchild."
David even chimed in, "That's true.
Kayla is young and beautiful, and unlike you, she quickly gave us a child. I really envy William."
With such words, dripping with sarcasm, they began to confront me directly. Christopher was no different. "It's true.
Maybe we should just kick out a woman who can't bear children and live here with William's family instead."
He casually made such selfish remarks. By this time, even I started thinking that leaving this house and separating from David could be an option, given we had no children. Right around then, Kayla became pregnant with her second child. Brittany's grandchild fever grew even more intense, and correspondingly, her treatment of me became harsher. And somehow, under a complete misunderstanding.
Isn't it because you're cheating that you can't have children? You're just worried you won't know if it's David's or your lover's child.
This ludicrous theory emerged. I was so dumbfounded I didn't even respond, but one evening at dinner, I noticed Brittany looking at me with a particularly snide expression. Confused, I asked her what was wrong, and she said,
"You really were cheating, weren't you?" "Just as I suspected."
When Christopher and David asked what she meant, she proudly declared,
"I've caught Misty cheating on camera. I hired a professional, so it's undeniable."
She then burst into laughter, seemingly pleased with herself. Hearing this, Christopher and David looked shocked at first, but, influenced by Brittany's confidence, said,
"If that's true, then it's divorce."
"Of course.
And she'll have to pay a hefty compensation."
Matching Brittany's malicious grin. "Therefore,
I understand." Then, at Mike's birthday party next week, which we have planned, I will explain the situation to all the relatives myself.
That's what I announced. The birthday party Brittany arranged for Mike was extravagant, as expected,
renting out an entire restaurant. The invited relatives seemed somewhat weary of Brittany's boasting but appeared to enjoy the food and drinks. As the party drew to a close, I took the microphone and stepped forward, drawing everyone's attention.
I have a brief report to make to everyone who has gathered here today.
I began. Beside the slightly murmuring crowd, Christopher, Brittany, and David, thinking I was about to admit my faults and discuss divorce, smirked maliciously, just like before. William's family did the same. I signaled to the staff, and a screen was lowered behind me. As a projector was brought in and the lights dimmed, a video began to play to the focused attention of everyone. The video started with scenes of what seemed to be a dodgy hotel district, and as it zoomed in on the entrance of one hotel, the complexions of David, Christopher, and Kayla, as expected, began to sour. Unaware of what was happening, Brittany looked on curiously, not noticing the troubled expressions of the three. The next moment, a gasp of surprise erupted from the relatives as the camera clearly captured a scene. And for good reason. The screen showed Kayla and Christopher emerging from a hotel, locked in an embrace. The room fell silent as the two of them shared a lingering, passionate hug, replayed in close-up. When they got into a taxi, the screen switched back to the same hotel entrance. This time, however, it was David, not Christopher, who appeared hand in hand with Kayla. David, Christopher, and Kayla were frozen, muttering, What the? The room erupted into murmurs again. I paused the playback, turned the lights back on, and began speaking into the microphone.
The report I have for everyone is straightforward. As you've just seen, David and Christopher have been cheating with Kayla. This evidence was thoroughly documented by the investigation firm Brittany hired.
I said, raising a thick file of documents for all to see, prompting another wave of murmurs. I waited for silence before revealing that the investigation firm wasn't hired to catch Christopher, David, and Kayla's infidelity, but to find evidence of my supposed cheating, as per Brittany's wish, likely instigated by David.
Probably David, finding me in the way, filled her head with baseless accusations. Accepting such tales without question is questionable in itself.
I added, inducing light laughter among the relatives, who then looked at David and Brittany with disdain.
Brittany, having received a report from the investigation firm, declared victory over catching me cheating, without checking the evidence. Unfortunately for her, I had no such skeletons in my closet.
I continued, projecting a photo onto the screen. It was a snapshot taken at the hospital when Mike was born, featuring Kayla holding Mike in the center, with a smiling William beside her, and me and David visible in the background, having come to congratulate them.
I've always been disliked by Brittany, so she probably didn't have a single photo where I was clearly visible. She sent this snapshot to the investigators with a note, "Catch my son's wife cheating," thinking it would serve as evidence.
As I glanced sideways at Brittany, her shocked expression seemed to confirm the story. However, the investigation firm mistook Kayla, the woman holding the child, to be the wife of Brittany's son they were supposed to investigate. Upon starting their investigation, they unexpectedly caught Christopher and David repeatedly visiting hotels with Kayla. Thus, the investigation firm, thinking William was the husband in question, informed Brittany that they had captured the evidence on camera. Brittany naturally assumed it was evidence of my infidelity. However, when suddenly confronted with claims of having proof of my affair, I was initially shocked, but then remembered something specific. The name of the investigation firm on the family credit card statement used by Brittany. In fact, Brittany, a spendthrift, had made a family card under my name for her use, supposedly for when her own credit limit was insufficient. As she made large purchases without consulting me, I had set up the card statements to be viewable on the app to check the monthly charges. So, the next day, I took a half-day off to visit the investigation firm I found online to explain the situation. I then requested an investigation from them. They readily agreed to take on the investigation to make up for their mistake, and quickly provided the results. After the screen was removed and the lights were brightly turned back on, Kayla, Christopher, and David all looked pale. I approached a great-uncle and aunt, feared most by Christopher and Brittany, from among the relatives. I'd prefer the children, especially Mike, not to hear what comes next. Could someone please take them to another room? That's what I requested. The great-uncle and aunt approached Kayla, took Mike, and handed him over to one of their children and their spouse. Following this, other children were led away by some of the women to another room, leaving the furious relatives, a stunned Brittany and William, and a visibly shaking Christopher, David, and Kayla. Then, Brittany, who had been shaking with anger, stormed up to Kayla and yelled,
"What have you done? Betraying me and William, with Christopher and David."
She attempted to grab Kayla, causing several relatives to hastily intervene, but Kayla was visibly terrified by her expression. Christopher and David looked just as scared. However, I decided to launch the final fireworks against them.
Regrettably, under these circumstances, I will be divorcing David. I apologize for troubling everyone until the end. According to the investigation firm, the inappropriate relationships involving these three didn't just begin yesterday. A reconciliation of the marriage is impossible.
Saying so, I covered half my face with a handkerchief.
Ever since learning about the investigation results, I can't help but think, perhaps Mike, and even the child Kayla is currently carrying, could be Christopher's or maybe David's. It's been incredibly hard to bear.
I staggered slightly, perhaps laying it on a bit thick, and the women remaining in the room rushed to my side, patting my back and supporting me.
"How shameless can you get? Disgusting!"
Poor thing. They started berating the three. The men looked on with contempt, surrounding the trio with cold stares. Christopher and David turned pale under their gazes, silent, while Brittany's ranting and Kayla's sobbing were the only sounds echoing in the room. The aftermath of the fireworks I set off spread far and wide. Learning that his wife and brother had affairs with his father, William was initially in shock, but soon began to seriously consider the possibility of cuckoldry I had suggested.
"It's got to be a lie. Mike and the baby in my womb are unquestionably your children."
Kayla pleaded desperately, but once a seed of doubt is planted, it doesn't disappear with a few words. Stealing away Kayla's attention, William used a paternity test kit he ordered to discover the children were not his. Even when confronted with the results, Kayla staunchly refused to admit to cuckoldry, driving William to contact Kayla's parents. Unexpectedly, her parents, unsatisfied with just William's story, came to my workplace seeking an explanation for the entire affair. Though it felt like a hassle, I saw it as a necessary procedure and took the next day off to meet with Kayla's parents, Kayla, and William at the law firm I had hired. After showing them the relevant documents and the infamous video, Kayla's parents were speechless. Seeing this, William boasted,
"See? I told you Kayla betrayed me, having affairs with my brother and father. It's clear neither Mike nor the unborn child are mine."
However, the lawyer clarified.
"Could we leave that discussion for those directly involved? We called you here today not to determine the father of the children, but to discuss claiming compensation from your wife as David's mistress."
William was taken aback by the blunt statement. Of course, it was expected. I found it hard to comprehend why the lawyer I hired would need to side with William. But more than that, Kayla and her parents were the ones truly shocked.
"I won't pay any compensation. It was you, being all about your work and an unaffectionate wife, that drove David to cheat with me. It's your fault, not ours.
Kayla retorted mockingly, but I replied, "Is that so? Then we have no choice but to let a third party decide who's right. Perhaps a judge?" At that, it was Kayla's parents who turned pale. And no wonder, as both of Kayla's parents are teachers at a prestigious girls' school in the region, known for its commitment to nurturing homemakers. The scandal of their daughter involved an assorted affair with her BIL and FIL, leading to a lawsuit for compensation, could easily bring disgrace upon them. As soon as I mentioned the possibility of court, Kayla's parents practically dragged her down from the sofa to the floor. "We're truly sorry. We'll take full responsibility for the compensation if you file a claim." Kayla's father, Brian, pleaded earnestly while apologizing deeply. However, apologies at this point meant nothing to me, regardless of who they came from. I signaled the lawyer with a glance and left the room. Later, the lawyer informed me that William, Kayla, and her parents caused quite a commotion afterwards, but they finally left after being sternly told by the lawyer that the police would be called if they didn't leave immediately. Subsequently, perhaps as a gesture to ensure silence, Kayla's parents transferred nearly twice the amount of the demanded compensation through the lawyer. After that, what became of William and Kayla was of no concern to me, but I learned about the fate of the entire in-law family through David, who also demanded compensation and property distribution from me. According to David, William filed for divorce and demanded compensation from Kayla. Furthermore, he refused to pay child support for Mike and the unborn child unless DNA testing proved they were his. He even declared he would contest paternity immediately after the birth. Kayla's parents, anxious despite my situation being resolved smoothly, forced a reluctant Kayla to undergo prenatal testing. The fetus turned out to be David's child, not William's. And shockingly, Christopher was Mike's father. Brittany, devastated to learn her beloved grandson Mike was actually her husband's son, suffered a mental breakdown. And has since aged rapidly, becoming almost bedridden, with Christopher providing constant care. William, however, has demanded compensation from Christopher and David for causing the breakdown of his marriage. Furthermore, to Christopher, he said, "If you cannot pay the compensation, then we can offset it against your inheritance. But in that case, I will not take care of any of you in your old age. Let David handle everything." That's what he apparently declared. However, William made it clear he would not care for them in their old age, leaving all responsibilities to David. Thus, faced with the prospect of losing his inheritance, Christopher and Brittany, abandoned by William, seemed desperate not to let David slip away. However, David himself was being pressured by Kayla, who had been divorced by William.
"Now that it's come to this, you'll have to take responsibility for me and the baby in my belly."
She demanded remarriage from him.
"I'm sorry for everything up till now. I apologize, so please, let's start over. I love you, Misty."
He begged, but it was clear he was not seeking my love but a return to financial stability and a wife who would dutifully serve his family for free. Having no lingering feelings for David, I instructed him through the lawyer again and blocked all contact, save for one social media account. The divorce was finalized after some contention. But the compensation and property distribution were paid in full in 2 installments. According to the lawyer, Kayla continued to live in the in-laws' house, acting as if she were David's wife. But they became known as the shameless family among the neighbors, leading to their seclusion. With Kayla neither helping with Brittany's care nor looking after Mike and the newborn, the kindergarten, concerned about Mike's unkempt appearance, reported them to Child Protective Services. In the end, Kayla's parents, who rushed over, took the 2 children, but to Kayla,
"You are no longer our daughter, nor are we your parents. Never show your face to us again,
they said. With nowhere left to turn, Kayla, like Christopher and Brittany, became wholly dependent on David.
It seems he's struggling to support 4 adults, including his mother in need of care, on his single income.
That's what it was. Moreover, a colleague from the same company as David mentioned.
The story, even with embellishments, has spread, making him the worst man worthy of a compilation video site, a subject of rumors.
But he continues to work there, unable to quit due to financial reasons, and feeling out of place. As for William, he seemed to regard me as a fellow victim. Though he had previously demeaned me along with Kayla, Christopher, and Brittany as a woman who wouldn't even bury her children. Naturally, I ignored him at work, but when the rumors somehow reached our company, unable to bear the gossip, William voluntarily transferred to a subsidiary in the countryside. After everything was settled, I was approached about a transfer to an overseas branch. Although I had always hoped to work abroad since my interview, the offer came as a surprise. However, encouraged by my supervisors for the career I had built and my language skills learned in my spare time, and tired of being the subject of sympathy and rumors, I decided to accept the offer. Hearing this, David, from whom I hadn't blocked the only remaining social media, sent a barrage of cliched messages begging for reconciliation, but planning to cancel my mobile phone upon leaving here, I ignored them. Despite everything, cutting ties with that in-law family felt like a stroke of luck. Thinking about it, I felt ready to face any challenges that might come. Surprising myself with my own resilience. Realizing I had been too self-deprecating before, I resolved to approach the future with optimism and determination.